inmate on suicide watch wouldn't stop staring behind the correctional officer until the officer finally turned around and saw something standing there. Inside Blackwood County Jail, one officer would discover that some prisoners aren't locked in cells. They're trapped inside the building itself. And by sunrise, someone would whisper his name from the darkness. Officer Marcus Grant hated working medical observation during graveyard shift more than any assignment inside Blackwood County Jail. Most correctional officers preferred noisy housing units where inmates argued constantly. Televisions blasted through bars, and movement never truly stopped. At least noise made the hours pass faster. But medical observation was different after midnight. The hallway felt abandoned, almost lifeless, with only the soft buzzing of fluorescent lights overhead and the constant rattling of the old ventilation system echoing through the concrete walls. Every footstep carried unnaturally far, making the jail feel much larger and emptier than it really was. Grant slowly walked down the narrow hallway carrying his clipboard, radio, and a cup of cold coffee toward Observation Room C, the oldest suicide watch room in the entire building. Officers often joked the room was cursed, but nobody ever explained the joke completely. Tonight's inmate was Tyler Cole, a 26-year-old arrested earlier that evening after violently attacking his own brother during what deputies described as a severe mental breakdown. During intake, Tyler repeatedly screamed, "He followed me here," before smashing his forehead into the holding cell door hard enough to split the skin open. Now, Tyler sat silently inside the brightly lit observation room, wearing only a green suicide smock, staring motionlessly into the far corner while Grant took his seat outside the cell. The long, terrifying night had officially begun. For the first few hours, everything inside medical observations seemed completely normal. At least by Blackwood County Jail standards. Officer Marcus Grant completed his routine 15-minute checks while sipping cold coffee and fighting the exhaustion creeping into his body. The graveyard shift always felt endless inside the old jail, especially in medical observation, where silence swallowed nearly every sound. Tyler Cole barely moved from the thin mattress, bolted to the floor inside Observation Room C. Most of the time, he simply sat motionless, staring into the far corner of the brightly lit room without blinking. Occasionally, Grant noticed Tyler whispering softly to himself, but the thick, reinforced observation glass muffled the words so badly that none of it made sense. Grant assumed the inmate was suffering from severe psychosis. After 6 years working corrections, he had plenty of mentally unstable inmates talking to imaginary people. Still, something about Tyler felt different. He didn't look angry or violent anymore. He looked terrified. Around midnight, the silence finally started getting under Grant's skin. He leaned closer to the observation glass and spoke. "You need water?" Tyler didn't react. "You hungry?" Still nothing. Grant sighed and straightened in his chair. "Cole, I need verbal acknowledgement." Slowly, Tyler turned his head toward the glass. His face looked far worse than earlier. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes like bruises, and his pale skin almost blended with the harsh fluorescent lighting. For several long seconds, he simply stared at Grant. Then, in a soft, trembling voice, Tyler quietly asked, "Do you hear him too?" Grant frowned immediately. "Hear who?" Tyler's eyes slowly drifted back toward the far corner of the room. The man. Grant looked carefully around the observation cell. Empty concrete walls, empty corners, nobody there. "There's nobody inside that room except you," Grant replied calmly. Tyler slowly shook his head. "No, not in here." Then Tyler's terrified eyes shifted directly behind Grant's chair. His breathing quickened instantly as fear spread across his face. "He's standing beside you." Grant turned around quickly, but the hallway behind him was empty. Just filing cabinets, fluorescent lights, and old peeling paint. When he faced the observation glass again, Tyler was still staring beyond him. The inmate looked like he was watching someone breathe over Grant's shoulder. Around 2:47 a.m., Tyler suddenly sat upright on the mattress. His lips curled into a nervous smile. "You came back," he whispered softly. Grant stood immediately. "Who are you talking to?" Tyler's smile disappeared. "He doesn't like interruptions." Then a slow scraping sound echoed directly behind Grant's chair. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The noise sounded exactly like fingernails dragging across concrete. Grant spun around again. Nothing. The sound stopped instantly. He inspected the wall carefully, but found no marks, no explanation. Tyler began laughing quietly, though tears rolled down his cheeks. "He says you still don't see him," Tyler whispered. Grant grabbed his radio. "Control, Unit 7. Only static answered him. His stomach tightened immediately. The radio battery was full. It should have worked perfectly. The temperature inside medical observation suddenly dropped. Grant could actually see his breath forming in front of his face. That was impossible inside the jail. Tyler curled into a ball on the mattress while whispering repeatedly, "Don't look at him. Don't look at him." Grant slowly glanced toward the observation glass. His entire body froze. In the reflection, behind his chair stood a tall, pale figure. Its head bent sideways unnaturally, while its mouth stretched into a grin far too wide for a human face. Grant spun around instantly. The hallway was empty again. When he turned back toward the glass, the reflection had vanished completely. Tyler began crying harder. "He knows you saw him." Grant's pulse hammered violently inside his chest. For the first time in 6 years working corrections, real fear crept into his mind. The old medical observation hallway suddenly felt wrong. Too silent, too empty. And somewhere far down the corridor, something metallic scraped softly against concrete again. Grant tried calling control repeatedly, but every transmission returned only static. Worse, nobody had passed through medical housing for nearly an hour. No nurses, no officers, no movement anywhere. The jail felt abandoned. Tyler stared silently through the glass while Grant checked the wall clock. 2:59 a.m. The second hand moved strangely slow. "He wants you to sit back down," Tyler whispered. Grant ignored him and stepped closer to the cell. "Who is he?" Tyler swallowed hard. "I don't know." "Then why are you talking to him?" Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "Because when I ignore him, he hurts me." Grant finally noticed deep scratches covering Tyler's forearms. Some looked self-inflicted. Others looked jagged and uneven, like claw marks. "What does he want?" Grant asked quietly. Tyler slowly lifted trembling eyes toward him. "You." Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered violently before shutting off completely. Darkness swallowed everything except the bright observation room. Tyler stared behind Grant again, watching something move closer through the darkness. At exactly 3:10 a.m., Grant's radio suddenly crackled back to life. "Unit 7, status check." Relief flooded through him instantly. Minutes later, Officer Ramirez arrived inside medical observation. Ramirez was older, experienced, and impossible to scare. But the moment he entered the hallway, his face changed. "What happened here?" he asked quietly. Grant frowned. "What do you mean?" Ramirez pointed behind the observation chair. 4 deep scratch marks were carved directly into the concrete wall. Grant stared in disbelief, because those marks definitely weren't there earlier. Ramirez lowered his voice. "There was another officer assigned to this room years ago, Officer Hayes." Grant listened silently. Same observation room, same suicide watch assignment. Grant felt cold again. The inmate kept talking about someone standing behind Hayes.
"What happened to him?"
Grant asked carefully. Ramirez hesitated before answering. "He resigned after the incident, then killed himself 4 months later." Inside the cell, Tyler whispered softly, "He remembers Hayes." Suddenly, the camera monitor glitched with heavy static. For one horrifying second, a dark figure appeared directly behind Grant. Grant spun around instantly, but nothing stood behind him. Ramirez cursed under his breath while staring at the monitor. Then the camera feed changed again. This time, the observation chair wasn't empty. A thin gray man sat there, smiling directly into the camera. Its eyes were missing completely, leaving only black empty holes. The screen immediately turned black. Tyler screamed inside the cell. "Don't let him down!" Grant and Ramirez looked upward together. A ceiling tile shifted slowly above them. Something crawled through the ceiling. Ramirez grabbed his radio desperately. "Control! Supervisor to medical observation immediately." Again, only static answered. Then a long, unnatural shadow stretched across the hallway wall outside the room. No person stood there casting it. The shadow moved first, bending its head sideways unnaturally. Suddenly, the observation room door slammed shut and locked automatically. Ramirez yanked the handle violently, but it wouldn't move. Tyler slowly smiled through tears. "He says all three of us can see him now." Pale fingers curled around the ceiling tile overhead while a whisper softly said, "Ramirez." The lights died instantly. Total darkness swallowed the hallway. Grant heard Ramirez breathing heavily near the locked door, while Tyler whispered terrified prayers inside the cell. Above them, something crawled slowly across the ceiling tiles. Then came a loud thud nearby. Grant immediately pulled out his flashlight and switched it on. For half a second, he saw it clearly. A tall gray figure stood beside the observation desk. Its arms hung unnaturally long while its stretched smile split across its face. The flashlight flickered once, and the creature vanished. Ramirez slammed against the locked door screaming for help. Tyler suddenly shouted, "Don't turn your back on him!" Grant turned quickly toward Ramirez. The creature stood inches behind the older officer, smiling near his ear before disappearing again. Violent scratching erupted behind Grant. Fresh words carved themselves into the concrete wall. "Watch me." Tyler laughed and cried simultaneously. He doesn't want to be alone anymore. Seconds later, the hallway lights returned. The creature vanished completely, and the observation room door unlocked itself with a soft metallic click. After surviving the shift, Grant searched through old jail records before going home. Hidden deep inside archived incident reports, he discovered a file from 15 years earlier. An inmate named Leonard Voss had occupied the exact same observation room before dying during suicide watch. Before his death, Voss repeatedly told officers, "There's someone behind you, and he wants me to look at him." Officer Hayes later documented scratching sounds, freezing temperatures, strange reflections, and seeing the dead inmate appear on camera after death. The report ended with a final note, "Unfounded. Officer fatigue suspected." Grant rubbed his tired eyes when his phone suddenly buzzed. An unknown number had sent a single photo attachment. It was a security image from earlier that night. Grant sat outside the observation room. Ramirez stood near the door. Tyler sat inside the cell, and directly behind Grant stood Officer Hayes. His gray skin looked dead. His empty eyes stared forward while the eyeless, smiling creature stood beside him. Grant almost called out sick the next night, but guilt and curiosity dragged him back to Blackwood County Jail. Tyler remained inside Observation Room C because no psychiatric beds were available. The moment Grant sat down outside the cell again, Tyler whispered, "He's happy you came back." Grant ignored the fear twisting inside his stomach. "Who is he really?" Tyler looked exhausted. "Leonard Voss." "The dead inmate?" Tyler nodded slowly. Nobody listened when he begged for help. Nobody watched him. So now he makes people watch. Grant glanced toward the scratched wall. "What does he want from me?" Tyler stared Grant's shoulder once again. "Now he wants you." The fluorescent lights buzzed louder overhead. Grant refused to turn around no matter what Tyler stared at behind him. Then cold breath touched the back of his neck. A whisper spoke directly beside his ear. Officer Grant. Every muscle inside Grant's body locked in fear, but he remembered Hayes' warning from the photo, "Don't look." The whisper behind Grant changed voices constantly. First Ramirez, then Grant's dead mother, then strangers he had arrested years earlier. "Look at me," the voice kept repeating softly. Suddenly, the chair beside Grant slid backward by itself. His radio launched across the hallway and shattered against the wall. The observation glass slowly fogged over. Words formed through the condensation. "Watch me." Tyler screamed from inside the cell. "Don't look." Darkness swallowed the hallway again. Grant shut his eyes tightly and refused to move. Bare feet dragged slowly across the concrete behind him. Then his mother's voice whispered beside his ear, "Look at me, baby." Grant shook violently but answered softly, "No." Inside the observation room, Tyler suddenly lifted several feet into the air. His body bent backward unnaturally while invisible force squeezed him. Grant slammed the emergency button repeatedly. Nothing happened. Then through the reflection in the darkened glass, Grant saw Officer Hayes standing behind the creature. Hayes silently mouthed words. "Don't let it make you watch." The creature suddenly turned toward Hayes with animal rage. Hayes grabbed the eyeless figure from behind while the entire hallway exploded with blinding white light. A scream echoed through medical observation unlike anything human. It sounded ancient, furious, trapped. When backup officers finally forced open the hallway doors, minutes later, Tyler lay unconscious inside the cell, but still alive. The thousands of scratches covering the walls had vanished completely except for one final message carved deeply into the concrete. "He saw me." Tyler survived and transferred out days later. He never again mentioned the smiling man, but he refused to sleep in darkness for the rest of his life. Soon afterward, Blackwood County Jail permanently shut down Observation Room C. Officially, the room closed for renovations. Unofficially, officers refused to work near it alone. Yet, late at night, correctional officers still report hearing scratching sounds echoing from the sealed hallway. And sometimes an inmate on suicide watch stares past the officer outside the cell and whispers softly, "He's standing behind you again." Some things inside a jail never leave the building. If you enjoyed tonight's story, subscribe to Taka Tales Stories for more terrifying true horror tales every week. And remember, if someone in the dark tells you not to turn around, listen carefully.